and I look forward to spending the rest of the day with you discussing these important topics about freedom, privacy, how blockchain can help us with this, and what other tools are available. And we're going to open up with our first speaker, Dimiter Shalvardjiev. Where is Dimitar? There he is. Okay. Thank you, Dimitar.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks
there's your podium. So Dimitar is managing director of Code Runners, which he has been running since 2012. Is that correct? And he is a PhD candidate in data ethics. Okay, so this is a very important topic about how do we use big data and what are the ethical implications. So I'm very pleased to hear that he's studying sort of this as a area of academic interest, and we look forward to hearing his presentation.
Hello. Thank you for being here. Let me start by apologizing. I was the one that was late, so that's why we're starting a little late. Anyhow, today what we are going to talk about is data and privacy in Industry 4.0. The split between freedom and regulation. We are all here together by the idea of freedom, and it's what connects us, the will to be free and independent. And then again, however, we are living in an industry world, and we need to adhere at least to certain rules, to the rules of economy, so to speak. But the rules of economy are changing very rapidly with Industry 4.0, with the data economy. And this is exactly what I'd like to talk about today, how we are split more or less between freedom and regulation. A few words about me. Sorry, that's the clicker, right? Okay. By the way, anyhow, about me, I consider myself in 3 words to be a rebel. Other features that define me, I would say, is that I'm a computer engineer. I'm a little bit paranoid by nature. I try to be fit as possible and live an independent life. So computer engineer and paranoid means that I have a focus in information security. Paranoid and fit means that I need to be durable in case the zombie apocalypse rules around. And then fit and independent means sporty. And kind of all my interests and hobbies collided in the company called Code Runners. But today what I'm going to talk about, and I'm sorry, obviously the fonts are broken. So anyhow, the things that I'd like to share my thoughts on today are what I call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And they are big data, analytics, the cloud that enables them all, and the monopolies that were the first movers in that area, and it actually are the game changers of Industry 4.0. So they dominate Industry 4.0, they are here to stay, and more or less they define where we are going to go in the space. Only recently did one of the monopolists openly talk about their plans to move into blockchain, and essentially, given that it's a decentralized system, they jotted out the way that they are looking to centralize it anyhow. So yeah, a lot of important thoughts we need to, a lot of thinking we need to do today, and probably obviously on our spare time to get more into that. So the first thing, the first game changer, so to speak, was big data. Big data was actually defined and has been defined for a very long time by data that's larger than a regular Excel file. But then over time, mostly after 2008, it became evident that certain companies are actually collecting quite a lot of data on us. And it varied, and it actually led to what was called the modified Moore's law, where the amount of data that's collected each year surpasses the total amount of collected data in the whole history of humanity. So yeah, big data on itself isn't that interesting because those are just data points about our life, and things that by themselves don't have a lot of meaning. For example, where have you been 15 days ago at 12:30? Yeah, that's just a data point, that's just a fact. However, the thing about big data is that having a lot of those data points and those little facts, they enable the next horseman, data analytics, through data analytics and big data. It has been shown that it's possible to predict certain behavior and patterns of behavior that are unknown to ourselves even. And you probably know that. But still, currently, let me just check my numbers. Currently, the wider belief is that this is something good, and 76% of digital users around the globe believe that actually data analytics is a good thing, and that it should be a provider of better service by all the companies. So yeah, please have my data, use it, and then provide a better service back to me. And again, having so much data means that actually our privacy is, and being able to analyze it at scale, means that actually our privacy is at risk. What does that mean? One of the monopolists, and I'll leave him unnamed, but the same one with the cryptocurrency, actually asked private hospitals in the UK and the US, where data privacy is a little lacking. So they got into contractual obligations with hospitals that hospitals provide data about patients, anonymized. And what the monopolist gave back to the hospital was actually the patient outcome. So what was going on was the ability of the monopolist, based on the multitude of data points that he collected on each and every one of us, to deduce who that person was, and then to be able to de-anonymize the data, and from that to provide the hospital with each individual outcome of the corresponding treatment. And yeah, they say that they did it only on a limited set of people, and so on and so forth, that accuracy wasn't great, but yeah, imagine that if they can do that with hospital data, and hospital data is, in information security world, one of the most confidential data there is. Imagine what they can do apart from that. So imagine the type of control that they have over our life. And actually, this kind of thing appeals a lot to private business because, as you all know, especially in the very expensive markets like the US and the UK, insurance is very expensive, and healthcare insurance is terribly expensive. So by providing data about the patient outcome and by tracking patients, legally or not, insurers were able to actually cancel insurance packages. There were a lot of scandals around that too. For example, the fact that people that use CPAP masks, so these are breathing masks during the night, if you, for example, have issues breathing and snore during the night, you would get a CPAP so that sufficient oxygen goes to your brain. So that data was also collected by another monopolist and was provided to insurance agents. And the reason for collecting that data was that the monopolist actually manufactured or owned the manufacturer of the CPAP masks. So they provided data, and essentially insurances were cancelled because, for example, they went to patients and said, well, you slept only 3 hours last night. or you didn't use your mask last night, so your insurance is canceled. So yeah, these are the individual impacts of data and data analytics on our lives. And the reason why this is troublesome is that that would lead to exclusion. And we try to live along the liberal/libertarian belief that anyone who doesn't who's not problematic for our own living should be allowed to do whatever he likes. Right. And the next, actually, the enabler of all that is cloud computing. And with cloud computing, the thing is that you don't know who exactly owns the information. So say we form a startup, we together, this group today, and we start collecting data and trying to build a better world by leveraging data analytics. Well, you put your data, usually, especially if it's a larger amount of data, not on your servers, but on some sort of cloud computers, and it's a black box. You don't know what's going on there. So you don't know who's on the other end of the wire. You don't know how your data is handled. And actually, sorry, I'll refer to statistics one more time. Yeah, 68% is the global annual rate, the spike of global incidents per year in terms of information security, and most of them are already related to cloud computing. So essentially what that boils down to is that you give up your data, you allow other companies to essentially spy on you, and then they don't even care about your data and they leak it all around the place. Which leads me to the next, to the next thing there. Who are these players? Well, we have the four monopolies here, which we all talk about. However, in each industry there are between 10 and 20 companies that actually own the whole space and that allow other players to join. And the reason that they allow other players to join is that they are abusing their monopoly position and they can actually put companies into bankruptcy. And remember the Facebook story where they acquired Instagram? Well, Instagram was a very small player back in the day, but it provided something that Facebook didn't, the type of service that Facebook didn't, and Facebook wasn't able to actually beat them in the data game because people were interested in sharing photos without all of the hassle of Facebook. So what happened is that Facebook acquired them very early on for what was a tremendous amount of money according to people back then, but over time, as we've seen, the value of the data acquired is much, much higher. So yeah, the monopolies, not only in Industry 4.0, but also in the previous industrial iterations, have such a dominant position that they can allow companies or organizations to succeed or fail, depending on their own interest. And has that happened before? Yes, of course. This is a picture from the Great Depression, where more or less in the 30s the same thing happened. And people, because of the rise of large industry, people were left in the street when the economy eventually collapsed. By the way, we are in the longest cycle of economic rise. So a lot of people expect a downturn any moment now. And it was, and the monopolies more or less were, well, they are not social organizations, so they didn't care about the people. And I think that this is what's going on right now. And I think that, going back to the topic of this talk, we are split right now between choosing one of two paths, the path of liberty, which leads to monopolies, decentralization, which leads to huge corporations that actually define not only the corporate, but the personal life of each and every one of us, or we take the other path, which is the path of legislation and regulation, and we actually take back control over what we do. So that's my talk, and I guess that there will be a lot of questions, so I'd welcome any of those. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimiter, and I like he was just on time. So if I can ask every speaker to do exactly what he did and stay within your allotted time. And we have 5 minutes for questions. There are a few microphones that we can hand out to people, or if you want, you can stand up and shout out. So if I can get 1 or 2 questions from the audience, just raise your hand and somebody will come to you. Anybody, or you're still asleep? Yes, go ahead. Yeah, there's a microphone right there coming to you. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Bojan, and I would like just to ask you to tell us about what you do. You mentioned that you had a startup since 2012. So
yeah.
That would be interesting to know. Thank you.
Okay, so before that, I used to be an information security engineer. 2012, we started a software company called Code Runners, and we do services. It's not a startup in the sense of a product startup. It's more of a services company. However, we have a small product here and there. But the pressure is palpable. I mean, we've built products for startups in Europe and the US. And the pressure by the monopolies is already very visible. So essentially, if they give you any data that you can work on, you are poised for success because you have a competitive advantage that no one else has. If they like your idea, you're there. If they don't, you're a goner. You can't collect that much data in sufficient time. So. Sorry, I'm not sure if I answered your question. My background is information security, and the company offers penetration tests on top of other things. So we have information security and ethics in our portfolio.
And you mentioned penetration testing. So my understanding is a company can hire you to try and attack their network and their systems from the outside to see how deeply you can get into their organization.
I specifically didn't touch on how mishandled data is nowadays. But the data scandals are more or less an everyday thing. The next speaker will touch base on risks and running risks in Industry 4.0. So he'll probably talk a little bit around that. But yeah, the numbers are staggering. So last year alone, the personal data of more than 3 billion people came out. Obviously, there were duplicates there. So certain people or certain accounts came out multiple times. However, you can imagine that if not this year, then next year, your data will be out there.
And what type of organizations hire your services? Is it hospitals, government, banks, all of the above? Is it Bulgarian companies, foreign companies?
It's mostly international companies because data security is not very interesting here. But also a local bank, and it has to do a lot with ISO compliance. So we support companies with their ISO compliance.
International standards. Okay.
So yeah, ISO 27001 is information security. So we do a pen test, which is a requirement, a non-official one, but still a requirement to be ISO 27001 certified, especially if you're larger than a certain size.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that data gets mishandled quite a lot. I read somewhere that only 5% of all the data that we generate is actually collected and analyzed, and the remaining 95%, we're not even collecting it.
No.
So, when you're using something or when you're walking and you have your phones and things, so
I would guess that this type of whatever you do is already, especially if you live in a developed country, is already collected. However, a lot of people live in areas with poor coverage, for example, or and it's not us. So the focus is on the person, but we don't collect quite a lot of industrial data, which is still to collect. And for example, we don't collect the number of hours on this lamp. And this is going to be collected slowly but surely. So the percentage would rise. But some of that data is unusable. So the easy win is individual data, so how we can advertise more and more. But over time, different models would be built, business models would be built, where other data, the remaining 95%, would be easily monetizable as well. However, the easiest to monetize data is already monetized, but it's a process, so it would take some time.
So it's all about where the money is, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Well, fantastic. So let's give everybody, please give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.